My name is Bill Edgar. I'm the president of the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, and on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for logging in this morning. Today's meeting is going to be on the WebEx platform. This teleconference meeting constitutes the board's regular meeting for the month of August 2020. We very much appreciate the time you've taken from your schedule to join us this morning. Now that we've been all trained and experienced in these virtual meetings protocols, I'm not going to spend a lot of time to going over them again. However, our staff will be happy to assist you if you need help. Please contact Ryan Jones or Leslie or anyone on the staff, and they'll try and help you. Their contact information is on the website. And they would be happy to help. In addition, there are an extensive list of instructions on the second page of the agenda, which may help you if you're having trouble accessing the site. Well, I don't know about you folks, but this isolation and trying to conduct business virtually is really getting a little old for me. I'm having a hard time figuring out whether I'm working from home or I'm at home where I'm at work. So anyway, regarding the meeting process itself, I think the way we have to run these meetings has generally been fine. And therefore I'll proceed the same way as we have before, which is, as before, Ryan Jones, our board clerk, will be moderating these proceedings from a technical point of view. He and Leslie and Michael Wright and the other staff will field comments and questions addressed to the presenters, either from text or emails as they receive them from you. Or you can go through the chat function on this platform if you feel comfortable with that. Second, following each presentation, I'll ask for questions or comments from the board members. After the board is finished, we will unmute the public speakers. Leslie and the staff will try to identify those who have requested to speak on a first come, first served basis. After we completed the public testimony, I'll bring the matter back to the board for more comments and questions and final action if final action is required. You should be aware that the meeting is being recorded and will be housed in our website, just as our streaming video has for our other meetings that we have been doing for the last couple of years. We'll probably be taking a break every hour or so as appropriate to give our reporter and the staff a little break to catch up and so on. And Ryan will place a sign to appear on the screen at the break, stating the time we will return to the meeting. Finally, there is a closed session today at the end of the agenda, which is the first time we'll be dealing with this, but in a virtual setting. So at the end of the agenda of the closed session, as the item comes up, the board members will leave this WebEx platform and go to the other platform that Leslie has provided an email to the board members. We're going to leave this WebEx platform open, and it will be monitored by Ryan. And when the closed session is finished, we do not anticipate any items that have to be reported out today. But Leslie will inform Ryan as to when the closed session is over, and Ryan will then announce that on the WebEx platform, adjourn the meeting, and record the time for the meeting adjournment. So we'll try that, see if that works today for the closed session. Members, I believe we have a full agenda today, including many interesting items. However, I am still anticipating finishing the agenda, including the closed session, around 1 o'clock or so for those of you that have other appointments and so on that you need to get to or have virtual meetings. With regard to the agenda items themselves, under item 3, the minutes, this item will be continued to the next meeting because it did not, the minutes for June 26th did not make it into the packet. And so we'll continue that for another meeting. I should say that Ms. Dolan did complete her work and get it to the staff, but somehow it missed getting in the packet. Brian, just for your information, this is the second time that's happened, and you probably ought to put it on your checklist so that you don't make sure that it's in the packet that goes to the board members. That'd be good. And then we have our usual consent calendar under item 5, and there's 7 items on it today, and I've been told that all 7 items are in order, and we have core letters for all of them. Michael, I just want to give you a little shout out. This is a lot of items that the staff had to prepare reports for, coordinating with our partners, both the local and the state level, and get letters from the Corps. So congratulations to the staff. They're keeping the trains running, and we appreciate it. If you pass those remarks along, I'd appreciate it, Michael. Thank you. Under item 7A, legislative update, Darren Soon will give us a little report on that. Under item 8, we have the Department of Water Resources, and there's 4 items listed on the agenda that we will proceed with as they're listed. Then under the category of board items, we have 3 important informational briefings, which are also listed on the agenda. And then finally, we have our usual executive officers report, including the informational staff reports for the board's review, and we also have our normal board comments, committee updates, and calendar for everyone's edification. I said before, we have a closed session, which we will conduct after the meeting, after which the meeting will be adjourned, reconvened and adjourned. Okay, as you're probably aware, we're on item 1 still of the agenda. As you're probably aware, item 1 includes the welcome, introductions, and announcements. We've concluded the welcoming remarks. And next, I believe Leslie has some introduction she'd like to make of some new staff members. Leslie?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, it's one of my favorite things to do is introduce new staff members at board meetings. We do have 2 today, and Ryan, I believe we have photos for them since we aren't in person. I'm going to start with Jenny. First of all, joining us in the operations section, Jenny 2 is joined the board as a student assistant, and she is currently a senior at Sacramento State University, majoring in civil engineering. Also a member of the American Society of Civil Engineers and the California Geotechnical Association. So we're looking forward to a lot of great help, and welcome, Jenny. We are also welcoming today a new engineer, Dennis Bartolome. I think we have his photo as well. He has joined our Sacramento levees section. So that section is finally almost completely up and functioning. We just have 1 more hire. Dennis holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, also from Sacramento State University, and he has his engineering and training certificate. Outside of work, he stays active by running daily, playing basketball, hiking, and biking along the American River Trail. So he's very familiar with our levee system, although probably not doing that too much this week with the air we've had. So we would like to welcome Dennis as well, Mr. President, and those are my announcements.
Thank you. Okay, members, we're on item 2, which is our roll call. Ryan, if you would please call the roll to determine for the record whether we have a quorum to proceed to conduct our business this morning, I'd appreciate it.
Board Member Grego.
Any,
Oh, okay. Board Member Johnson,
Good morning. Present.
Board Member Ramirez,
Morning, here.
Board Member Valines,
Here.
Board Member Countryman,
Present.
Vice President Dolan,
I'm here.
and President Edgar.
I'm here. Thank you, Ryan. We have a full quorum, full board today, and I appreciate that. Item 3 is the minutes, which we said will be deferred to next month because it wasn't included in the packet, and so we'll have hopefully 2 sets of minutes to approve next month.
Yeah.
We're on item 4, Leslie, this is your item. If you want to review any items on the regular agenda and make some corrections or modifications if you want to.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did get some notes from some of the board members that they were able to access the minutes. However, I don't see them in the box account now.
They show up for me with a timestamp of August 18th, and I'm 99% sure I reviewed them over the weekend because it reminded me that I wasn't at the meeting.
Perhaps I could ask the other board members if they have seen them. Bill, I know you didn't get a chance to see them, but we perhaps could still adopt them if the rest of the board members saw them.
I received them.
I saw them. Obviously I did.
Okay, so that would be Jane, Mary Jane, Brian,
Joe.
and Joe. So that's
And me too, Mike.
Okay, that's over a quorum, Leslie. So we can do that if you want.
Yeah, I wasn't there, so I have to abstain on the vote. So my vote doesn't count for doing it, but I did see them.
I wasn't yet on the board, if that makes a difference.
Well, let's do
I
this.
don't know. I think I need to ask G.
Well, Leslie, let's not make a big deal of it. Let's just put them on the agenda for next month. Make sure
Okay.
it's in the packet and proceed.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Is that all the comments?
Sorry, no, for the agenda, I just would like to point out that we do have core letters for all of the consent items.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item then is item 5, the consent calendar. And we have all 7 items on the consent calendar are in order. And we have core letters for all of them. Therefore, unless anyone wants to remove items 5A through 5G from the consent calendar, or the public desires that any one of these items be discussed separately, we'll be approving them, items 5A through 5G, as with a single motion and a second, followed by a single vote. And obviously, this is going to be a action item. Members of the board have any questions on these 7 items? Okay, any comments from the board, Leslie, that you can see?
Nothing from the board, Mr. President.
Okay, anything from the public? Okay, may I please have a motion and a second on the 7 items that remain on the consent calendar, items 5A through 5G?
This is Jane. I move approval.
Thank you, Jane. Is there a second?
I'll second, Joe.
Okay, Joe Countryman seconds. Moved by Dolan, seconded by Countryman. All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, all 7 items are approved. Again, congratulations to the staff. That's a lot of good work done during the month. Members, we're on item 6, which is public comments not on the agenda. Not on the agenda. If anyone in the public has comments regarding items not on the agenda, please raise your hand or text or email or call us up or whatever you want to do. Do we have anybody that wants to speak to the board on any matter not on the agenda? Do you see any, Ryan?
I see no hands.
Okay. Leslie, do you agree?
I don't see anything over here, Mr. President.
Okay. All right, we'll proceed then to item 7, which is the legislative update. And Darren Suen has this report. Darren?
Thank you, President Edgar. Good morning, and good morning, Vice President Dolan, members of the board, Darren Soon, board staff, policy advisor. I want to wish all of you, I hope you're staying healthy and safe, and hopefully you don't have any loved ones in the wake of the fires that are happening right now. Our thoughts are with everybody on the front lines. I want to provide this quick legislative update. You know, as you all know, given the pandemic, the legislative calendar got short. And to give you an idea, we started out with over 2,000 bills this year to be processed and heard. And when the COVID epidemic hit, that was reduced down to approximately 500 bills. As of today, I feel like this is almost a game of survivor. There's approximately 280 bills left to be processed between now and the end of session, August 31st. Which is the last day for both houses to pass bills. So with that, there are a few bills that I think were of significance to this board, and I'll just go through those briefly. Ryan, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So of these three, even here, only one of them is still made it through. But AB 1958, Assemblymember Cooper's bill dealing with, go back one, please, Brian. Thank you. Critical infrastructure, Board Members Johnson and Board Member Grego, you may not, I don't believe you were, well, I know you weren't around when this first started, so I'll give a little background on that in a minute. AB 838, Assemblymember Eggman bill with dealing with Senate Bill 5 that was adopted in 2007, dealing with our urban level protection, 200-year urban level protection, and also, required the CVFPB preparation in adoption in 2012. Finally, Assembly Bill 3226 for Assemblymember McCarty, dealing with the West Sacramento flood project, state authorization of that to mirror congressional authorization. And then, of course, you may recall that last month's work to include an amendment about annexing the properties within the maintenance area 4, which is the also known as the sphere of influence of RD 537. So these three bills, again, 2 of them did not make it through, and only one is still quote in the game. Next slide, please, Ryan. So AB 1958, again, just quick background for some of the board members who weren't around. What began as AB 137 as it got an amendment and then reintroduced in January as AB 1958. This picture was one of the things that RD 1000 and American River Flood Control District, this board we saw on the news. Assemblymember Cooper also saw this news segment and wanted to do something about it and introduced this bill. Board staff together served with Bob Reed, the Central Flood Control Association, City of Sacramento, RD 1000, American River Flood Control District, Public Works in City of Sacramento, served as a subject matter expert working group to inform the Assemblymember of this bill and take it through its process. Just for a little background, this picture was discovered in this fashion, but when crews from RD 1000 came back, they had a tent covering this site. So had they not seen this in this condition before, they would not have noticed it when the tents were coming back, when the tent was on top of it at a later date. Which brings me, next slide, please, Ryan. Thank you. So the main points dealing with AB 1958 were declaring that the state plan of flood control is critical infrastructure and amending Water Code Section 8712 to better enable inspections to occur and prohibit inspections that would prevent inspections and repair. In other words, concealment of the levee system and allowance of removal of personal property on the levee so that inspections could occur. It also included an urgency statute, meaning that if it were to pass and the governor were to sign, it would go into effect right away. Next slide, please, Ryan. Thank you. So here you can see a list of registered support that the Assembly member received on this. And then next slide, please, Ryan. Thank you. Also, there was some registered opposition, and these were the entities that the subject matter expert working group was dealing with during this process. Most of the three primary concerns were around the concealment, prohibiting the concealment and covering of the levees, the noticing of getting people to move out of there, so requiring at least 24 hours notice, and then finally personal property rights. These were the three main points of contention that we attempted to work with these groups and find compromise. Next slide, please, Ryan. So we made it through the Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife Committee, 13-0 abstention, passed in the Fiscal Committee unanimously, passed in the Assembly, meeting the urgency threshold, 74-0. Upon referral to the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee, however, the chair of that committee, the amendments that the chair wanted was not amenable to the author, Senator Cooper's office, and subsequently canceled the hearing, which would have taken place on August 5th, earlier this month. So with the chair of that committee also reached out and would like to restart this conversation in September, the feeling that there is a path, it's a worthy bill, but they want to consider the three things that I mentioned earlier. For your information, the compromises that we proposed were to not require noticing within flood season. Of course, the concealment and covering, those were things that would completely negate the bill itself. And then finally, personal property rights. That was something that was difficult for the group to relinquish on as well. So those were the issues that if we continue these conversations in September, they will revolve around those three issues. I would expect. Next slide, please, Ryan. So the next bill, AB 838, Assemblymember Eggman. You can see here it is dealing with the extension of the Tullinger flood protection in urban areas by 2025. This one deals specifically with Mossdale Tract and extends it to 2028 with the condition that the department imposed that it would be required that CVFPB, San Joaquin Area Flood Control Agency, to contribute fair and reasonable share of property damage caused by a flood. This slide shows this referred to the Senate floor. Actually, it passed yesterday on the Senate floor, so congratulations, CVFPB. Chris Elias and Scott Shapiro are also on the line. If anyone has any questions, would like some further detail on that. But now they will be scheduled at some point in the near future to back to the Assembly for concurrence on this bill. So this is the lone survivor of the three. Next slide, please, Ryan. Thank you. So registered support here you see for AB 838, and then next slide, please, Ryan. Also support. If you're wondering why these are some names you might not necessarily typically see in the flood world. It's because the Assembly bill was referred to the Agricultural Committee when first go around, and then went to the Senate, Natural Resources and Water Committee in the next go around. Next slide, please, Ryan. Okay, this is a picture of Mossdale Track you see here in red. This was originally part of the Lower San Joaquin feasibility study, but it was taken out. You'll be hearing more about the Lower San Joaquin feasibility study later on today that will deal with the two central and northern Stockton areas, the colored areas above. But this will be, the idea is that this will be in the second study phase. Thus the need or desire for an extension of the urban level protection requirement to 2028. Next slide, please, Ryan. Thank you. Finally, we have AB 3226, City of West Sacramento, seeking a state authorization to be consistent with the federal authorization of the ARCF 2016 project. We, the board, became involved when we were requested in October of 2018 from Reclamation District 900 to include the areas of MA4, also known as the Sphere of Influence area of RD 537, to be included in their district. This one did not make it. Again, as you see here, it's been in the suspense file. I've spoken with Greg Fabian over at the City of West Sacramento. They will seek to reintroduce this bill next session. There is some uncertainty about the need for the legislation for the reclamation district, and something we're continuing to vet. History behind it is that, and some of you may recall from the presentation last month, in 1990, then Senator Garamendi, State Senator Garamendi, pushed forward Senate Bill 2236, which enabled the annexation of maintenance areas 10 and 11 into the American River Flood Control District. This was because the American River Flood Control District boundaries were in the statute. My understanding is the areas of Reclamation District 900 are also in statute and still require this type of action. So Reclamation District 900 was pursuing the same path that occurred with the American River Flood Control District. But we'll work to clarify this information as we move forward, as the bill gets introduced in the next session. Ryan, next slide, please. This is just register support for this bill. By the way, there's no opposition for this one or for AB 838. Just wanted to clarify that. And then next slide, please, Ryan. Thank you. So this is just a exhibit. You might recall this from the last month's presentation, RD 900. I just wanted to refresh your memories. You could see the green area here is the RD 537 Sphere of Influence area, or Maintenance Area 4, that they're seeking to annex into their RD 900 boundaries. To the RD 537 remnant area is something that's already now part of RD 900. And next slide. Okay, and that's it for the state. I just want to quickly mention from the federal perspective, you might all be following the word of 2020 negotiations for the with the House and Senate staff have been somewhat slow going. So now the hope is that there'll be at AWIA, American Water Infrastructure Act, and WRDA heard in the lame duck session of Congress. So our eyes are on that. Of note there is the comprehensive study for the Yolo Bypass Cashew Complex, which also identifies and calls out the Yolo Bypass Partnership, which we're really excited about. That's it. Are there any questions? I know there's a lot of information.
Okay, thanks very much, Darren. Are there any questions from the board at this point? Okay, questions from the public, Ryan?
I see no hands raised.
Okay. All right, well, thanks, Darren. Let's move to item 8.
Thank you.
Which are the reports from the Department of Water Resources. Under item 7A, Jeremy Erich, the chief of the division, has submitted his written report, which is included in the packet, and that's available to the board members. If there are any questions on that, we can take them up at this time. Do we have any questions on 7A?
I have nothing here.
Okay. Let's go to item 8B, which is Eco Restore Program Update. Steve Rothert and Bill Harrell will be doing this one, and at this point, I'll call on Steve to introduce it. Steve Rothert, please.
Thank you, and good morning, President Edgar and Vice President Dolan. Opportunity to provide this update. I'm hoping that Ryan is pulling up my handful of slides that will help
yes,
go through.
We have them on the screen now, Steve.
Presentation. That to talk through a before I turn it over to Bill. Do you have that?
Are you referring to 8A? Is that?
No,
I was given introduction as we discussed on Tuesday, and I just had a handful of slides. I sent them to you yesterday. I might have.
Yes, I'll pull that up now.
Awesome, thank you. Just say a couple of. Appreciate
Steve,
the opportunity to provide this.
Steve, you're breaking up a little bit, so I'm not sure exactly what the connection problem is here, but maybe if you could speak closer to your microphone, it would help.
Okay, is this helping at all, President
Yes.
Edgar? Okay.
Yes, it is. Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you. So, in the past, Jeremy Erich, the chief of the Division of Flood Management, has provided these monthly updates. And going forward, Jeremy and I will share that role in presenting to you. It won't be a strictly alternating pattern, but we will decide based on the content who's most appropriate to give the update. Let you all know that. And I'm a relatively new director or chief of the Division of Multi-Benefit Initiatives. I started in mid-June after about 20 years working for the River Conservation Group, American Rivers, where I really tried to take an approach of understanding perspectives around issues and problems and trying to reach solutions that, while maintain of river conservation and ecosystem health, also try to take into consideration and address as many of the issues as possible in a solution. And I bring that general ethic of inclusion and collaboration to this new role, and I look forward to working with all of you in that spirit. And toward that end, I just want to mention 3 things. One is that the Department of Water Resources staff and Executive Director Gallagher and her staff are working to develop a calendar of items, of topics that DWR and the board would like to have presented and addressed in these meetings. And so we will have a good understanding going out for a year and a half as we're we you and to so that's one. Secondly, we've recently identified and assigned Greg Foley, who is in the Division of Flood Management, as a liaison between the Department of Water Resources and the board and staff. And it's really intended to facilitate coordination and communications and not at all an additional layer that we will have to get through. And I think you will find as you interact with Greg that he is not only amazingly responsive, but also really enjoyable to work with. So I invite you to work with Greg to address any issues of communication or coordination that might come up. He's super helpful. And finally, I would just make a personal invitation to board members and staff to reach out to me directly about any of the topics that we're discussing today as a follow-up, or any additional matter that you might be interested in talking about. And as the new guy here at DWR, I won't be able to answer, I might not be able to answer all the questions you might have for me today, but there are a number of long-term staff at DWR on the phone with us, and we'll be able to answer any of your questions. So with that, let's move to the next slide. And just gives you an overview of the 4 general topics that we will be addressing today. Bill Harrell will address the Eco Restore. Mary Jimenez will flood protection update, and let's see, the staff addressing the flood protection or preseason flood coordination meeting is from the Division of Flood Management, and I apologize. I haven't met this staff, but we'll get them introduced as we go forward. Before I just touch on some of those things, if we could, for the benefit of Ms. Griego and other newish members of the board, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the organizational structure of the Department of Water Resources. You can see there the executive branch with the I think it's 9 different parts of DWR programs, working with Carla Namath, Cindy Messer, and Michelle Bononis. And hear from Chris Chernell's group, the Integrated Watershed Management Program, under which my Division of Multi-Benefit Initiatives works, and also Gary Lipner's group, the Flood Management and Dam Safety realm, where Jeremy Eric's Division of Flood Management is based. So the next slide, if you could, please. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong. So this is the Division of Multiple Benefit Initiatives. My division, you can see we've got the Delta Levees program, the Eco Restore, and the System-Wide Multi-Benefit Initiatives, and we'll hear from the last 2 there. And I think then the next slide, please. Okay, so we will hear from Bill Harrell. Will give us an update on the progress of the Eco Restore projects towards meeting habitat objectives, and let us know what projects are still under the design and permitting phase, and what will be breaking ground, if all goes well, next year. Next slide. Mary Jimenez, the leader of the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan update effort, will provide an update on the ongoing efforts to work with stakeholders to get input flood plan and the conservation strategy, and the analytical activities that are underway to inform that plan. Next, this is just a brief item that I wanted to mention that I'll cover that we won't come back to, but I just wanted to applaud Executive Director Gallagher for organizing the multi-state and partner really visit to the Yola Bypass and Lower Elkhorn Basin levee setback project. I believe most of the board members were able to participate in that, and DWR staff are happy to participate in sharing about the progress of that project. And just the next slide, if we could go to, is you'll see an aerial shot that Ms. Gallagher and I and Chris Chernell, my boss, were able to view from a helicopter tour that we took of this and a number of other Eco Restore and Yola Bypass projects. And so what we're looking at here, just to orient you, is in the lower end of the photograph is the Sacramento Bypass. The Sacramento River is off to your right. So when the bypass is flowing, water would flow from right to left to Yola Bypass, which is off in the upper left-hand corner to the left of the green strip of vegetation, which marks the Tule Canal. And you can see in the middle there, the black square is the Bright Landfill project, which was Bright Landfill, which was a part of the project, relocated to that location to accommodate the levee setback, which our team is getting underway just now. And you will be getting an update, I think next month, on the groundbreaking and progress of that project. But just so you know, the new levee orientation will come into this picture from about the middle of the right edge of the photograph and past just beneath and then around the Bright Landfill area, that black square there, and generally follow that smaller strip of green up 5 or 6 miles, I believe, to where ends the existing levee, right where Highway 5 crosses Yola Bypass. So I just wanted to provide an opportunity for folks to better understand the magnitude and scale of that project. And then finally, Lance Oblong, if we could go to the next, thank you. Lance Oblong from the Division of Flood Management will give us an update on the activities, the preseason flood coordination activities as we approach the hopefully wet season within the next few months. So that is all I wanted to provide you all as an overview. Unless there are any questions, we can turn it over to Bill Harrell, who's the chief of the Eco Restore branch and program, to update you on that exciting program.
Thank you, Steve.
This is Jane. I just feel the need to tell you that last photo was the Enterprise Bridge over Lake Orville.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I should have mentioned that. Yep. Vice President.
Okay, Steve, thank you. Bill?
Yes, good morning. Can everybody hear me? I'm calling via phone line, so I want to make sure.
Yes, we can hear you very well, Bill. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, and good morning, President Edgar and board members. It's a pleasure to be here to share an update on the California Eco Restore Initiative, one of my favorite subjects, by the way. My name is Bill Harrell, as Steve suggested, and I'm DWR's manager of Eco Restore, and I reside in the recently formed division, as Steve described, of multi-benefit initiatives. What I'd like to do today is just give a brief update of Eco Restore, first orient you to current projects under construction, and then share with you highlights from the past 5 years, and take a brief look at upcoming projects to watch. Next slide, Ryan. I'm kind of a map guy, and so I think the best way to start an orientation is with a map. So here's a map of the current eco-restore world as we see it. The first thing I'd like you to notice is that there are a lot of projects on this map. In fact, 32 total as part of the eco-restore portfolio. The projects are color-coded to help distinguish main habitat features of projects like tidal, floodplain, setback levee, fish passage, etc. And I understand you have a copy of this map in your meeting materials, so I'd encourage you to take a look at this more closely later if you'd like. But what I'd like to draw your attention to today is the two boxes highlighted in blue on the right, the upper two boxes. These are projects that are currently under construction phase or have started construction this year. In the first box there, projects 1 through 4, those are projects that have started in the recent past and are currently under construction or in some phase of construction. Together, those 4 projects are over 3,700 acres of habitat. In the box on the upper right, these are this map was made in or in May of this year, 2020, and it says construction plan for 2020 in that little text box there. But most of these projects have actually already started construction. So, and you're probably familiar with some of these projects, but together those projects are another 3,900 acres of habitat in the region. So together, under construction right now in the Delta region, over 7,600 acres of habitat projects. And again, these aren't just habitat projects. Many of these are multi-benefit projects with flood benefits and habitat benefits. So now if you look at the bottom two boxes, the one on the left, you'll notice we have 12 projects in various stages of planning. Some of these will go to construction as early as next year. And on the right, we have 12 completed projects that we are completely finished with. So tidal projects in the construction completed box, we have over 1,900 acres of tidal projects completed and over 1,700 acres of non-tidal projects completed. So to date, we're up over 3,600 acres of tidal and non-tidal wetland production. Next slide, Ryan. Thank you. So this spring marked the 5th anniversary of the Eco-Restore Initiative, established in 2015 to accelerate restoration on at least 30,000 acres of habitat across the Delta. So after 5 years, we've made some pretty impressive amounts of progress, I think, and collectively we are on track to accomplish the initial goal of Eco-Restore. However, there's a lot of work to do, a lot of challenges still to overcome. The pictures on the right here are of Winter Island, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. This was breaching the levee on a 300+ acre site just at the confluence of the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers. Next slide, Ryan, please. Thank you. So where are we at? To mark the 5th anniversary, we released the Eco-Restore Highlights fact sheet, which again I think is in your packet. The map I showed earlier and this graphic as well, a lot of good information about Eco-Restore can be found in there. As this graphic depicts, Eco-Restore is off to a great start, and we will continue to rely on a lot of agency support and private partnerships as we move forward. I'll use this opportunity to talk a bit about some exciting steps this year. In February, we hosted a volunteer planting day out at Dutch Slough in Contra Costa County. That marked a major milestone for that site following 2 years of construction. And now with the new vegetation in place, we're preparing to breach that site next year. In May, we broke ground on the Whales Belly Wetland project on Sherman Island in Sacramento County. Now that site represents a major step forward for us in terms of carbon sequestration projects on state-owned land. And in June, we celebrated the return of longfin smelt to the Tule Red Habitat Restoration Project in Solano County. So 6 months post-construction, the special status species, native species, longfin smelt returned to that historical site in fairly abundant numbers. It was pretty exciting. And lastly, We broke ground recently, as you know, on the Lower Elkhorn Basin Levee Setback Project in Yolo County, the multi-benefit flood and habitat restoration project, and contributes about 900 acres to floodplain habitat. And you may not know about this one, the Lower Yolo Tidal Habitat Project in Yolo County, which is at the bottom end of the Yolo bypass, 1,600 acres adjacent to the recently completed Yolo Flyway Farms. This is a Westlands Water District project that we are in partnership with them. And they will develop the site and then hand that over to DWR for long-term O&M. So again, when you add them all up and you stack these into these categories, this graphic depicts a really good summary of where we are at in terms of the eco-restore projects. Next slide, Ryan, thanks. Besides all the great recent progress I just mentioned, we have some major planning milestones that are, I think, worthy of mention. The Yolo Bypass Salmonid Habitat Restoration and Fish Passage Project up at the Fremont Weir recently completed their EIR-EIS in late 2019, and they're issued their biological opinion. I think recently talking to those folks, they're at a little over 35% design and currently in permit acquisition process for the remaining state and federal permits. That project is moving on very well. The Prospect Island project, over 1,500 acres down at the bottom end of the Yolo bypass to the east side. They recently this year, they've certified their EIR. They've done a settlement agreement with the folks on Ryer Island. So they are getting ready to break ground here probably next year. And the Lookout Slough project, which you've probably heard a little bit about, they've completed their draft EIR this year, hoping to have their final EIR in a matter of a couple of months, and final permitting in spring of next year. So a lot going on there. Thanks, Ryan. This is kind of a fun thing. So we've spent a bit of time documenting our progress. And if you haven't checked out any of the eco-restore videos, they are available on either the DWR eco-restore website or on the DWR YouTube channel. There's 7 videos, 6 on specific projects such as Dutch Slough, when I mentioned earlier, and 1 on Delta habitat restoration as a whole. That's the one on top there, Restoring California's Great Estuary. These really highlight recent history on our groundbreaking efforts on a lot of our projects. And our newest video there on the bottom, it documents the Winter Island groundbreaking that video was released just a couple of weeks ago. Great. These are only like a few minutes long each, really worth the watch if you get a chance during your lunch break or something. And a neat factoid about these is that 4 of these videos were featured as part of a national film symposium in late January or late last year in 2019 in Reno as part of the National American Fisheries Society and Wildlife Society conference. And the videos were well received, and it's good to get the word out kind of nationally about what we're doing here in the Central Valley. And these are a really good tool for us. Okay, next slide, Ryan, thanks. So a quick look ahead for tidal wetlands, some things to watch here. The Wings Landing project. We hope to break ground really in a matter of weeks on the Wings Landing. It's a tidal restoration in the western upper Sassoon Marsh. This is part of our fish restoration program effort that will count towards the biological opinions and the Sassoon Marsh Management Plan restoration targets. The effort's being implemented by a private sector partner through a contract that we did. And then DWR will take on ownership of the parcel and long-term O&M. The Bradmore-Arnold projects, I put those together because they are right next to each other. They are adjacent projects right in the northeast Sassoon Marsh. Together, it's over 1,000 acres of habitat, and it's very unique in that part of the marsh, and with a big upland island associated with it. And that is scheduled to go to construction next year. And then Chips Island, not sure if you folks know, but Chips Island is 900-acre plus island right in the heart of Delta smelt habitat at the confluence of the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers. And that is now DWR owned mostly. There's a small piece that we will soon have ownership of. And then that project will be going into planning and design next year. Okay, levee setback projects. I'll mention Twitchell Island real quick. As you may know, that setback project is broken up into a series of phases with the highest priority sections of levee to be restored first and set back. We are ready to go on the most recent piece, just waiting for pieces of funding to put that in place, and we're hopeful that will get going this year and this next year. And then multi-benefit projects. I mentioned Lookout Slough. This is one of our largest projects. It's over 3,000 acres that will add capacity to the lower part of the Yola bypass. And they're hoping to have all their permits in hand by spring of next year. And then the McCormick-Williamson Tract, Phase 2. As you may know, Phase 1 was completed this past year, where they did the interior levee resloping and built an interior ring levee around the Hearst Communications Tower. So that phase is done. We're looking now at Phase 2. We're in design and planning in 2021 for that, and then construction in 2022. And that will open that island up for flood control as well as tidal habitat. Next slide. So yeah, that's it. So that's the highlights on where we are with the Eco Restore projects. Again, there's a much more detailed status on a lot of projects, the Fish Passage projects, the grants administered by the Delta Conservancy and the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and a really nice timeline in the highlights fact sheet for you in your meeting materials. So with that, though, I'll close, and I'm not sure when we want to do questions, now or later, but I will be around if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Bill. That was an excellent presentation. Appreciate that very much. Are there board members who have any questions on Bill's presentation?
I don't have anything, Mr. President.
Okay, how about the public?
I see no hands from the public.
Okay, thank you, Bill, for that presentation. We're going to move on to item 8C, and Mary Jimenez has this report, which will provide a little update on the 2022 plan update. Mary?
Good morning, everyone. I'll
Good
wait for
morning.
Ryan to pull up my presentation. Hi.
Hi, Mary.
One moment,
Right.
please.
Okay, thank you. Looks like the one. All right. Good morning, President Edgar, members of the board. Pleased to be here this morning with my new division chief, Steve Rothard, and my other colleagues. My name is Mary Jimenez, and I'm in DWR in the System-Wide Multi-Benefit Initiatives branch. And as Steve mentioned, I'm the lead for the 2022 update of the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan. Next slide, please. Today, I'm going to, as before, have a similar format to my presentation. I'll briefly remind folks where we've been. The last time I was in front of the board on the flood plan was back in June, when I gave an overview of the 2022 risk analysis. And a little more time on where we're at right now. We've been very busy the last couple months with a focus on ongoing work between the CVFPB and Delta planning. We'll touch on implementation progress of the system-wide elements of the CVFPB, beginning with Paradise Cut. Talk a little bit about what we've been doing on the conservation strategy update and regional flood management planning. And of course, leave time at the end for a nod to where we're going and the future work over the next month or two, and leave plenty of time for questions and comments. Thank you. Next slide. Next slide, please. So where we've been, back in June, I described our ongoing update of the flood risk analysis for the 2022 flood protection plan, being led by Steve Cowden on my team. We covered the foundational work that we're going to be building upon and really highlighted the components of the analysis and the key enhancements planned for 2022. What was most important about this ongoing update is that it's going to provide us important information about how flood risk is changing system-wide since our last flood plan update over time. It's going to continue our focus on life safety as a metric most closely associated with the state's public safety mission, supplemented by information on economic assets at risk. Next slide, please. And where we're at right now. So engagement with the Delta Stewardship Council on the CVFPB has been really picking up the last couple months. I wanted to mention and send a gratitude to Ruth Darling, who co-presented with me on the CVFPB to the Delta Stewardship Council at their July 23rd public meeting. Our presentation included, along with an overview of the flood plan itself, it included a focus on our current collaborative efforts between our three agencies, the Delta Stewardship Council, Central Valley Flood Protection Board, and DWR, as well as a couple of areas of future collaboration between our three agencies. The CVFPB overview that Ruth provided included an overlay of our planning areas showed on the slide. You can quickly see the subset of our broader CVFPB planning area that is the focus of our work with the Delta Stewardship Council. Basically, they're highlighted, outlined in red at the southern end of the Sacramento Basin, and the northern end of the San Joaquin is where we're focused with the DSC. Next slide, please. So when Ruth and I were in front of the Delta Stewardship Council in late July, we highlighted the ongoing collaboration at that time, beginning with the MOU working group that was formed between our three agencies to better coordinate and collaborate on future Delta levy investments, and reaffirmed the intent of that working group, really the goal to establish an effective working relationship between our agencies where we have overlapping authorities and responsibilities in the legal Delta. We also acknowledged the productive ongoing staff discussions on our climate change technical approaches. Called out here on the slide, the Delta Stewardship Council has their climate initiative Delta Adapts, and we have our CVFPB climate change analyses that we're updating for 2022, and just really the acknowledgement that we are already beginning to work together and need to continue to work together to coordinate on these climate change technical approaches. At this time, I wanted to give a nod to the fact sheet that I've included in the board's packet this month. Thanks to my team who's been working hard on communicating our climate change technical information, we have a draft fact sheet that summarizes our 2022 analyses. If you print it, it's 1 page front and back, but it should be 2 pages in a PDF. Okay, next slide, please. Then we ended with some remarks about our intent to increase our collaboration moving forward in a couple of areas. The first note is noted here. We have initiated early consultation for preparation of a consistency determination for CVFPB in early August. So we gave a nod to it in late July, but since then we have initiated that early consultation. We first met, I believe it was August 6th. Wendy Wang from my team is the lead for that effort, working closely with our CEQA team and Ruth Darling from the Flood Board. We also have the potential to collaborate further with the Delta Stewardship Council and their staff on performance tracking as we get a little further along in those efforts. And so we highlighted that for the DSC back in July. Delta Stewardship Council staff are involved in the board's Conservation Strategy Advisory Committee. That's including a look at performance tracking, so that's one area, but we will be able and need to engage with them more broadly on performance tracking moving forward in the flood plan. As you're aware, the conservation strategy is just one component of a broader performance tracking effort that we are developing for the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan. Okay, next slide. So a high-level summary of some of the feedback we received from the DSC in late July. Overall, they were appreciative of the overview that Ruth and I provided of the flood protection plan and our update. They were very supportive of continued inclusion of the regional flood management planning efforts in our update process, noting the success of the past and just pleased that we're continuing that effort, as I think many of us are. They're very supportive of our continued collaboration and offered up some helpful comments to help us develop the theme of CVFPB alignment with other state efforts, and questions and comments on the updates to the policy issues and recommendations with all of our stakeholders over the next 2 years. So, very helpful comments. Next slide, please. So I'll move on to kind of the next segment that we've been focused on the last 2 months. And that is what we were calling implementation progress of system-wide elements of the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan.
Mary, before you do that, could we open it to questions on any part of your first presentation? Because when this was discussed before on the board, I know that the Delta Adapt people that are working on their program had indicated that they were using basically all of the modeling and assumptions and technical data that DWR has used in its various programs. But at that meeting, Michael Musera had some concerns about that technical data. So is that still an issue that's going to be resolved somehow or not?
Yes. Yeah. I believe they are still digging into that, and that working group is continuing to meet.
Okay. I think, you know, the assumptions and modeling may be different because for each one, for our planning effort, climate change effort, and their Delta Adapt policy. But as we get to the point where we are, based upon those technical concerns, making recommendations to the policy leaders for policy decisions, there has to be at least an understanding of the differences of the technology, and there may be, just as long as the policymakers have that in mind going forward, and we don't run into a train wreck with all the technical people not agreeing on what we're doing. But I'm looking forward to a consensus building technical report being submitted to the policy leaders so that they have that as a foundation to make policy decisions. And they may be different. You know, different modeling occurs at different times and all of that kinds of things. But as long as everybody has an understanding of what technology everybody is using, what information and material and data is being incorporated into each study, and the reasons for it, then the policymakers are able to make their decisions based upon well understood technical data. And that's I think what our objective ought to be. So we don't run into that same problem we had a couple of years ago when you know, the Delta Levy Committee was working on a different set of assumptions than the plan was, and we had a real problems with that. So anyway, just to comment.
I agree, President Edgar. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say, you know, I think it's at the coordinating committee, we had a briefing on the climate change studies that were being carried out by the Stewardship Council, and I had some questions I didn't want to take up at that time because they were pretty technical in nature. And the Stewardship Council arranged for a briefing, and Darren helped facilitate that, where I could ask technical questions, and we had DWR and Stewardship Council and board staff all on this. I felt very special, but anyway, I think we got a good understanding of what they did, how they did it, and how it actually, I think, pretty well in with the with what Mary's doing. So I think we're headed in the right direction there.
Okay, thanks, Joe. That's helpful, and I'm glad that's being worked on. Okay, thanks, Mary.
You're welcome.
Let's proceed with your. Unless there are any other questions from the board, let's proceed with your next part of your presentation.
Are there any other questions from the board before I move on? I'll move on to the next segment. Yeah, thank you for pausing there. I think that was a good place to pause for sure. So the next part I wanted to update the board on is our implementation progress of system-wide elements. So as part of updating the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan and our focus on implementation progress and performance tracking together, we're beginning to explore implementation progress of the system-wide elements of the flood plan. The first system-wide element that we're focused on and started engaging with our partners on is Paradise Cut. So over the last month or so, we were happy to collaborate with our partners in the Lower San Joaquin Delta South region. And John Herrick from the South Delta Water Agency co-presented at the July Coordinating Committee with Chris Elias from San Joaquin Area Flood Control Agency and Rick Reinhardt from MBK Engineers. John gave a helpful background and context on the proposed expansion of Paradise Cut and a summary of its status, and for good discussion with many of our partners and stakeholders at the Coordinating Committee. Chris Elias put it further into context for expansion of Paradise Cut. It's part of a broader regional vision for flood risk reduction, climate resilience, and multi-benefit projects within his region. So next slide, please. Thank you. So borrowing from John Herrick's part of the presentation, I wanted to show here the conceptual design for the proposed project as it stands today. You will see Paradise Cut's important location within the basin there southwest of Lathrop and some of its major flood and habitat features for a minimal viable project that arose from the conceptual study. Next slide, please. So at a high level, as John communicated to the Coordinating Committee, conceptual planning is complete, thanks to a partnership between my team at DWR and American Rivers. Currently, the team there is working from a planning grant from the Delta Conservancy, supporting continued work into phase 2, that, as you'll see on the slide, is focused on addressing potential for downstream impacts in the South Delta. I also wanted to note, though, although it's not highlighted here, that I understand American Rivers has also begun early easement acquisition. So some work has also begun on phase 3, while the focus is on phase 2. Next slide, please. I guess before I go on to here, I could pause again if there's any comments or questions on Paradise Cut.
Any board members? Okay. Thank you, Mary.
You bet. So just one slide here on the conservation strategy update. I know we've been working really hard with the flood board and our partners through the board's advisory committee. I wanted to mention that the board's advisory committee did meet on July 16th. And from there, subgroups are being formed to dive into specific topics that will inform the update of the conservation strategy and the update of the flood plan. Those subgroups have already been meeting in August, thanks to the leadership of that committee. And we are working towards a next advisory committee meeting September 17th. All the while, we are getting the subgroups going and participating. We are also working to make sure that our schedule aligns between delivery of our flood planning products, the conservation strategy drafts and the flood plan drafts, to make sure we're aligning it with the needed feedback and review that we're going to need an input from the advisory committee. So thanks again to Ruth Darling and Brian Johnson and Jane Dolan. I feel like we're treading in a very helpful direction, notwithstanding our very aggressive schedule to make the most of the time we have, and all of these folks that are involved in the advisory committee to be productive. So thank you very much.
Mary, what are the subgroups?
Brian can correct me if I'm missing one, I think, but I'm gonna rattle them off as I understand them. There's a permitting subgroup. There is a multi-benefit projects and performance tracking. Those are the three that are coming to mind. Is that correct, Brian? He's given me a thumbs up.
Okay, now what is that permitting group coordinating with the group we have on streamlining permitting, that working group of the coordinating committee that Preston and people from DWR and the Corps are working on? Are you aware of what I'm talking about?
I can look into that, President Edgar. I'm not sure unless others are more familiar.
President Edgar, this is Ruth Darling. I can address that just real quickly. So the permitting subgroup for the advisory committee is focused on permitting challenges and successes for implementing multi-benefit projects.
Okay.
So, which is a little bit different than what the inspection compliance work group is focusing on with permitting.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. If there's any other questions or comments on the conservation strategy update and engagement, I just had one slide here.
This is Brian Johnson. I don't have a question, but I just wanted to thank you and your group and Ruth and all of our folks. And if there are members of the advisory committee listening in, we're really getting into high gear here. And Mary mentioned the tight timeline, but I'm really optimistic about how this will go. There's just a lot of energy and direction, and looking forward to seeing what we get. So just wanted to thank the folks who may be listening in, and you, Mary and Ruth.
Thank you, Board Member Johnson. If there's any other comments on the conservation strategy update or engagement, I'll take it before moving on to the next topic. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. That's okay, President Edgar?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so regional flood management planning. Thanks to the leadership of Chris Williams and Aaron Wu and our RFMP team. Pleased to report that all 6 agreements have been executed with the regional flood management planning teams effective July 1st. Those contracts are going to run through 2023. The initial funding is being provided from our remaining Prop 1E. That was remaining, I guess, as of the end of last fiscal year. Those agreements can be amended if and when other funding becomes available. Now from new funding sources, if they're available, General Fund Prop 1 or Prop 68. So great news, very exciting to be able to do more with our RFMPs. I love the image that Chris Williams, I stole it from him, the gentleman in the upper right-hand corner looking under the rock to try to find some funds. It's been a very challenging time for us in funding, but to be able to continue to support RFMPs is high priority, and I'm very grateful we were able to scrape some funds together to keep them going. So thank you. Next slide.
That's great, Mary. That's really a giant step forward, I think.
Okay. So a near-term engagement and feedback schedule as the RFMP efforts are picking up. We're scheduling kickoff meetings with all 6 of those RFMPs. Last I heard from Chris Williams, all 6 of them have been scheduled for mid to late September. Moving forward into October and November, there will be work looking into the unit cost review for the OMR operations, maintenance, repair, rehabilitation, replacement unit costs from 2017. November to December later this year, we can dig into regional perspectives on the 2017 policy recommendations and progress there. The RFMP team is also scheduling monthly check-in calls with the RFMPs, and Aaron Wu is the staff lead under Chris Williams for the RFMP. This is just a really brief update this month. As I mentioned, I'll mention later, I do intend to come back with more in September.
Okay, Mary, on the second bullet point there, you have OMRR unit cost review. As I understand, we've been asking to update Chris's technical memorandum on the costs for ongoing maintenance and operations, and what compared to what we're spending now. That's been an excellent reference point. He's indicated that is in dire need of review. So I guess the only part of that engineering technical memorandum is that bullet 2. We're just going to look at the unit cost review part of that, and that's the only part that will be updated.
That's my understanding. That's where they're going to begin.
Okay. I just want to reemphasize that report is a very important report as far as the board is concerned, because it sets forth the reasons and the documentation for us pressing the LMAs and various and DWR in regard to their maintenance areas as to what they should be doing and what the criteria is and how they move forward in doing their planning for increasing the level of maintenance and operation of the levee system. So I'm glad at least we're going to be able to do that part of it. That'll be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on Mary's report from the board? Leslie, do you see any?
I have a question, Bill.
Okay, Joe.
Mary, I should probably know this, but I don't. Are we expanding from the 2017 report an analysis of the San Joaquin Reservoir's ability to increase their flood protection levels by either more storage or additional outlets on those reservoirs? Because we have such a huge flood problem on the San Joaquin. We're going to have to try to find something to do, I think, with storage to reduce the impacts.
Yeah, I'll check back with the climate change team. I do know there are some reservoir-related components of the climate change update, but just to get into the details of what they're planning to do there, how far we'll be able to take it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, President. Brian Johnson here. So, Mary, this goes back a little bit into an earlier part of the presentation, but you mentioned redoubling efforts around plan alignment with other statewide planning efforts, and I was happy to hear that. That's a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and I wonder if you could say a little bit more about what that might entail, and if there are particular priorities that you and flood board staff have in mind, and what that really looks like, kind of in practice. What are the areas of focus, and I'm interested, partly because I'm curious, but also if it provides an indication to what those of us on the board might be doing to help.
I appreciate that. Yeah, one way I've come to try to articulate it myself, there's a lot of use of the words alignment and integration. In my mind, when you go to just list out several different efforts that we're aware of in our planning area for water management at the state level, the Delta Plan, the Water Quality Control Plan, the Water Resilience Portfolio, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Each one of those efforts has a different relationship to the CVFPB. So in a sense, as you look at each one, the story is by necessity going to be a little bit different. So we're among, kind of working with the broader planning team at DWR and really trying to clarify what we mean by alignment integration. We do want to take almost a look one by one at each one of those efforts and the relationship to the CVFPB and try to do a better job of describing it. Is kind of one piece. But the other is moving towards, I think, as we've alluded to with some of the Delta work, how does the technical work underlying some of those efforts, if it is an effort that includes technical work, not all of them do, right? Like the Water Resilience Portfolio doesn't have its own technical work. Aligning or integrating where it makes sense in those types of efforts. So we're trying to give those efforts special airtime and attention to the extent that we can. So it's going to be a challenging effort to do that, but we're trying to wrap our heads around it right now, get our messaging straight, and provide some focus on each one of those water management efforts in the valley that do have a relationship to the flood protection plan. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
This is also, Mary, this is also a concern of mine because what we need to have happen, we've got all these plans and all these foundational material that support the plans going on, and many of us have certain responsibilities for comprehensive water management, and of course the board's main responsibilities are encroachments and maintaining the operation and good maintenance on the levee system. But there needs to be a more holistic approach to looking at what's being done across these agencies. But the problem for me was, as we discussed before in this issue, was that many of us don't have the resources to begin to, think about or look at or investigate or review what's going on in other areas and how it may affect the issue of what we're interested in, which is the operation and maintenance of the levee system. And for example, that came up in the Sigma plans that are being done right now. And we came in late at the, planning process for the groundwater management plans and said, oh, by the way, what you're doing may require a permit or may require us to look at these things. And they graciously included us in their planning process, but we simply don't have the resources to begin to look at all this stuff. And there are other agencies that don't either. So we're going to have to deal with that. And it's going to take the smaller agencies who have specific responsibilities in certain areas to have the resources to be able to do that if that's what's expected. We're in a position to look at reports that somebody else has done and make comments on them, but we're certainly not able to go out and begin to look at all these plans and how we would interface with that. Leslie's got that on her to-do list to try to work with some of these agencies to see if there's a way in which we can get some resources to allow us to do that. I would think the Water Commission would have the same issue, and of course the Delta Stewardship Council has those issues. Sigma not only has those issues, but they also have specific statutory deadlines and requirements that they have to meet. So This is a real issue. This idea of looking comprehensively at the system and how all of these efforts are linked together, and that's going to be a challenge resource-wide, I believe.
Mr. President, Board Member Ramirez had comments or questions?
Oh, yes. Tim, please.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Leslie. Maybe this is going to try to capture, Bill, where you just left off. And thanks, Mary, and the whole team for the overview. It's really helpful to see all that sketched out. You guys covered a lot of ground there. And maybe to Bill's point, what would be great to have, I think you hinted about this in the future, is sort of work backwards from the plan adoption and then talk about how these paths, intersect and lead to that point in time. And then maybe what we can do, Bill and Leslie, is look at that and figure out where we're going to engage and try to focus our time, the limited time that all of us have, so that we can really help push some of these things forward. For some of us, this is going to be our third plan. And I don't want all the people that are doing the work to have to slow down and participate in this process and put those things on hold. We want those things to keep going, I think. And at the same time, we want to, if we can, launch some of them or push them and pick up the pace rather than have a 18-month break while we all work on this other document. Hopefully there's a way for us and everybody to figure out how to use this effort as a place to launch or to quicken the pace, whether it's resources, different coordination with different groups. Joe mentioned as well on the San Joaquin side, some of these things, we have the data at our fingertips, but not the authority. And it'd be good to talk about what we do with those issues as well, so that we could help, again, push some of those things forward in a constructive way. But having this sketch really helps, Mary. So I want to thank you and the team for putting that together, and just maybe put a little flag up to have us as a group, Bill, think about how we can make use of our time and really help in a way that's going to get more done more quickly, if that's possible.
This is Steve Rothert. If I could comment on that. So I just wanted to follow up on comments that Board Member Ramirez and President Egger you just made, and also Member regarding additional and more integrated and comprehensive analysis, and the interest that we've heard from this board, in particular in the San Joaquin, as well as from other stakeholders in the San Joaquin. And we are trying to figure out a way to secure additional resources to put some enhanced focused energy into the San Joaquin Basin and try to do some of these integrative, more comprehensive activities that you're discussing. And of course, no promises, particularly in this difficult budget time, but we're doing our best to try to identify additional resources that we can apply, at least in the San Joaquin, to address some of these interests that you're talking about. And hopefully we can come back with a good report before too long. So we'll let you know.
Okay, anything else? Thanks, Steve. That's probably the most optimistic thing I've heard in a while. Anything else on Mary's presentation?
President Edgar, I did have some closing remarks.
Okay,
I think I have one more slide,
yeah, sure,
maybe.
Sure.
Ryan, can you advance it? I think I might have one more slide. There it is. So I just wanted to end by, reiterating that the regional flood management planning efforts, of course, are picking up, but I do plan to come back to the board soon to give a more substantive update on its progress, including outcomes from the board's coordinating committee this past Wednesday. So that was a really good conversation. So I wanted to bring back a little more on that September as things are picking up. but also to acknowledge the continuation of discussions with board staff and our Lower Sacramento Delta North RFMP partners on implementation progress of the YOLO bypass to further inform the 2022 flood protection plan update on what's going on there. So thank you for the time today.
Thank you, Mary. That was very helpful. Okay, let's move on to, if there are not any other questions from the public or the board, we'll move on. Ryan, do we have anybody from the public that wants to address these issues that Mary talked about?
I see no one from the public.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on to item 8D, and on the preparation for the upcoming flood season. And Lance, I guess you have this report?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Are going to kick up? Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning, President Edgar, members of the board. My name is Lance Abling. I'm Chief of the Flood Operations Center section for the Division of Flood Management, Department of Water Resources. Today, I'm going to give you a brief overview of our preseason flood coordination meetings, which are held virtually months of September and October. Next slide, please. These meetings are mission critical, held each fall before flood season begins, and they're sponsored by DWR in coordination with County Offices of Emergency Services. These meetings provide regional and local updates on flood preparedness activities and inform local partners on the state and federal resources available to them before, during, and after a high water or flood event. Next slide, please. This year, the agenda will consist of a virtual tabletop exercise centered around a flooding incident. Then National Weather Service will provide a winter weather outlook. And then finally, we'll close with a round robin of agency updates. And it's important to note that a tabletop exercise has not been on the agendas for over a decade. The locations of focus this year include 4 in the Central Valley, with Yuba, Yolo, Stanislaus, and 3 coastal locations, Humboldt, Marin, and Santa Cruz, 2 Southern California locations, Ventura County and Riverside County, and 1 in Northern California with Shasta County. And also of note, some counties will host their own meetings to tailor their coordination based on their specific flood risks or other threats, such as the recent fires posing winter mud and debris flow potential. Next slide, please. So the target audience for these meetings include emergency responders from California public agencies that have that primary responsibility for flood emergency response and coordination. Some of our partners joining the meetings include, for the federal agencies, we have National Weather Service, FEMA, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who provide their assistance through the PL 8499 program. Tribal governments, state agencies, including CAL FIRE, California Conservation Corps, Cal OES, Caltrans, and the California Highway Patrol. Counties, cities, flood control districts, reclamation districts, local maintaining agencies, law enforcement and public health, and finally, non-governmental agencies such as PG&E and Red Cross. And if you look, the map on the right shows the 2019 coordination meeting participation, and you can see it's distributed widely across the state. And typically neighboring counties will buddy up and attend other counties' meetings. So even with just 10 meetings, we reach many more counties. And next slide, please. And that's all I have for you today. Once again, I'm Lance Abling, the Chief of the Flood Operations Center section.
Okay, thank you, Lance. I understand we have a question from Chris Nudak.
Sure. Hi, Chris.
On behalf of our clients here in San Joaquin County, I'm assuming, because this has occurred a couple times in the past years, that San Joaquin County is conducting their own briefing with some attendance from DWR. But is there a reason why there isn't a pre-flood here in San Joaquin County, being that we're the majority of the Delta region?
Great question, Chris. Typically, the meetings are held every 2 years in those counties, and then some of the counties will do their own meetings, and then some of them will partner up with other agencies since they are doing the every 2-year cycle. So it may be that San Joaquin is coupled with Stanislaus counties this year. I'd have to confirm that with my staff, and this is pretty fluid right now, as we're actually still scheduling meetings further into into mid-September and October. So you can see on a couple slides back, Ryan, if you could back up 2 slides. Thank you. The meetings are still forming as we deal with kind of the pandemic situation, and now with the fires, we have to remain very fluid in scheduling meetings.
Yeah, in the 38 years I've been doing this, we've never partnered with Stan. So not to suggest that we couldn't, but the Delta region's large enough, and San Joaquin County's got the largest number of reclamation districts within the Delta region. I wasn't aware that the department was doing every other year with the preseasons. That's news to me. I know that we have a preseason every year with San Joaquin County, and this past year, my recollection was there was greater participation than the previous year, but I believed that they had intended to sponsor it on their own, and I just was questioning if that was going to be an ongoing consideration, or the department was going to step back in and start to sponsor them. So I'd appreciate if you wouldn't mind checking into that. That's a pretty important meeting for this region, and one that many of our folks look forward to.
Definitely, Chris. I will definitely look into it. And one thing to note also is that if the county actually hosts their own meeting, we actually still participate in that meeting. So there's
right,
there's
yeah,
coordination going on.
Yeah, no, I understand, and I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just trying to be informative, I guess, is the point. I just figured if this was an opportunity to ask that question, maybe we can get clarity on it. It's a big hole to be missing off of flood fight, given that we're somewhat the ground zero in a lot of these.
Understand.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
Lance, just one last question, if there aren't any others. Are you, in these tabletop exercises, I guess you are considering the fact that you're going to have to do this, flood fighting or flood management preparation, with the idea that this is going to be conducted under a pandemic as well as potential fires. So that's obviously very constraining for all the people on the front line.
Definitely, President Edgar, and that will be an underlying consideration while we elicit the responses from the different agencies, is how are you responding to this in a pandemic environment? And the great thing about it is we're able to leverage our new technology with the video conferencing and telephone conferencing, so we're actually practicing some of our coordination in the meeting itself.
That's great. Okay. Well, thank you, Lance. We appreciate it. Any other questions from the board?
President Edgar, Brian Johnson here. I have a comment that's kind of to all of them, and I'll take it now if there aren't any more specifics on this, or I'll hold it if there are.
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, I just wanted to step back and thank all of our presenters. I thought it was very well done. And these things don't always trigger as much discussion as they might. It's probably partly a tribute to the presentations themselves being, thoughtful and well organized, and maybe also, unfortunately, to this virtual format that we have. But we do appreciate it. And I also wanted to go back and thank you, Steve Rothert, for the way you framed this and for the effort that you're putting into it. And you, Leslie, and Jeremy. It's good to see the work going into the coordination between our two agencies in general, and also as it relates to these briefings. Like when it goes well, it all looks effortless, and it's easy for people like us to see, to not give a whole lot of thought. But of course, that only looks effortless if there's thought and effort going into it. So thank you all.
Thank you, Brian, for those comments.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? And Ryan, are there any questions from the public?
I see no questions from the public.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to call a 15-minute break. We'll be back at 11:05. Ryan, if you could put the sign up. 15-minute break, thanks. Okay, Ryan, I think we're back.
Okay.
Thank you. Members, will move on to item 9A. And Ali Porba, I guess, is going to introduce this item. And then members of the DWR staff as well as the Corps of Engineers will be assisting. Ali, you ready?
Yes. Thank you, President Edgar. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you. This is Ali Porbaha, staff of the board. As you know, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers plans to construct improvements to about 24 miles of existing levees and closure structures adjacent the Stockton area in the north and central portion as part of the low project. This project cost is about $1.4 billion for the next 10 years. If you remember last year, the board approved the design agreements for this project. The next board will be to approve the project partnership agreements among the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, San Joaquin Area Flood Control Agency as a local agency, and the board. This item will be presented to the board next month. In preparation of this future action by the board, today, Larry Ito with Department of Water Resources and Patrick Howell with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will provide an informational briefing of the project. Also, Chris Elias, the Executive Director of SAJAFCA, is available for any questions. Next speaker is Larry Ito, Senior Engineer with Department of Water Resources.
Can everybody hear me all right?
Yeah, Pat, that's great, Larry.
Okay, great. Good morning, Board President Edgar and board staff. My name is Larry Ito, and I'm with DWR with the Flood Risk Reduction Projects Branch in the Flood Projects Office. As Ali said, I'm here with Patrick Howell, the project manager for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, to help present this informational. And we also have Chris Elias from the San Joaquin Area Flood Control Agency, the executive director of SAJAFCA. He will not be presenting anything, but he is here if there are any questions for SAJAFCA during the presentation. With that said, we are here today to present this informational briefing on the San Joaquin River Basin, Lower San Joaquin, California project. This briefing is to provide the board with an update on the project's progress to date and the next steps for the Project Partnership Agreement, PPA, and the Local Project Partnership Agreement, the LPPA. Next slide, please. The project sponsors include the U.S. Army Corps as the federal sponsor, with the San Joaquin, with SAJAFCA, and the state as the non-federal sponsors. State project management is being performed by DWR Flood Projects Office in coordination with your Central Valley Flood Protection Board staff. Next slide, please. Here's kind of a quick overview of what we're covering today. We'll describe how this Lower San Joaquin River U.S. Army Corps of Engineer project helps to achieve the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan goals. A brief description of the project history, project study area, recommended plan, and the PPA and LPPA, and what is the future board actions. Next slide. I'll just kind of give a brief overview of, we'll provide an outline of how this Lower San Joaquin U.S. project helps achieve the Central Valley Flood Protection goals, Flood Protection Plan goals. Next slide. The Central Valley Flood Protection Plan proposed the state system-wide investment approach, the SSIA, for sustainable integrated flood management in areas protected by state plan of flood control facilities. Unlike previous plans, the SSIA reflects the state's strategy for modernizing the state plan of flood control facilities by improving the levee integrity and expanding flood system capacity through multi projects that meet the Central Valley flood protection goals. The SSIA is implemented through 5 major programs, as you can see on the screen. This project is part of the Flood Risk Reduction Program. Next slide. The Flood Risk Reduction Program of the SSIA has 4 components defined for capital investments. This project falls into the urban category, as you can see on the screen in the red arrow. The urban areas were defined as a priority in the plan with the goal of meeting 200-year level of protection, addressing the highest risk areas first, and maximizing federal contribution. Next slide, please. The Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, SSIA investment plan projected at between $17 and $21 billion is needed to meet the entire flood risk reduction portfolio. The urban flood reduction is a significant component of the SSIA. And the U.S. Army Corps projects represent $8.3 billion of the total. This is almost half of the plan's projected needs for flood risk reduction. Federal funds will cover approximately $5 billion of that $8.3 billion. Next slide, please. In 2008, the state passed Senate Bill 5, the Central Valley Flood Protection Act. This bill mandated that the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan be developed and that a 200-year level of protection be in place for all urban areas by 2025. The Central Valley Flood Protection Plan was completed in 2012, updated in 2017, and will be updated in 2022, like every 5 years. The state, in working with local agencies, prepared the basin-wide feasibility studies and regional studies to evaluate various regional management actions. Those studies provided recommended plans based upon identified local priorities. The U.S. Army Corps then prepared a feasibility study to identify the project that the federal government could invest in. The Lower San Joaquin River feasibility study was completed in 2018. The Lower San Joaquin River Corps project has received appropriations for design and the construction. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is a brief history. Actually, this project was initiated in 2008, and it's taken 12 years, and it's received its first federal appropriation. As you can see on the slide, there are several steps of getting here. We had the design agreement, and the local design agreement were approved in the board in April of 2019. That represented kind of the first step in the design and constructing flood improvements in the Stockton area. Also in 2020, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers work plan authorized $23.1 million of New Start funding. This was the only flood control project in the country that received a New Start last year. So what's left in all the processes, we're at the PPA, the highlighted dates in green are our estimate dates for construction start and completion of the project. These are the final steps in the process. Next slide, please. This slide provides kind of an overview of where this project status is as it compares with other U.S. Army Corps of Engineer flood risk reduction projects. As you can see in the green is Shujafka. We're here, and we just, like I mentioned in the previous slide, that we received New Start funding, and it kind of comes in line now with other core projects have, like Sabufka, American River Commons Features 2016, the dam raise. So we're right there. And I don't know if you noticed, but this is the only San Joaquin project that's in the time step in the location where we're at right now in terms of moving forward with the PPA LPPA. So Jafka has come a long ways to get to this point, and this is a significant step by moving forward with the PPA and LPPA in step with other U.S. Army Corps projects, as you can see. So that's kind of a brief overview of how this project ties into the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan and the SSIA. And that kind of ends my portion of the presentation. Don't know if there's any questions, but if there are, I'll be glad to answer them. Otherwise, at this point, I'd like to introduce Patrick Howell, the project manager, to outline the details of the project.
Thank you, Larry. Good morning, Patrick.
Good morning. Good morning, President Egger and members of the board. Again, I am Patrick Howell, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Project Manager for the Sacramento District. Many of you have seen and heard some of the information that I will present, but it is a refresher. Plus, new board members have not seen any of this information. So now I will go over the study area for the project. Next slide, please. The overall original study area is shown on the slide in the dark blue border. The study was then later rescoped to focus on high risk, high consequence areas, which are shown in the shaded colors. You have North Stockton in the yellow, Central Stockton in the red, and Reclamation District 17 in the tan cream color. Reclamation District 17, which is about 15,000 acres, was eventually screened out of the project due to development intentions in that area that goes against Federal Executive Order 11988. Basically, we, the Corps, cannot strengthen levees for the purpose of development. However, this area will be deferred to a second study and project at a later time. Next slide, please. The recommended plan. During the feasibility study phase, the team came up with a recommended plan, which was called Alternative 7A. This plan has an estimated total cost of $1.4 billion. That includes inflation throughout the construction period for the project. Net benefits of $296 million annual estimate benefits. The features will include approximately 24 miles of levee improvements, 2 closure structures, one at Smith Canal and the other at 14 Mile Slough, and extension of the Reclamation District 404 levees to reduce flanking from French Camp Slough. This plan is to reduce risk to approximately 122,000 people, 80,000 structures, and approximately 28.7 billion in property. Next slide, please. The authorized project. Next slide. This slide basically gives a description of the proposed fixes for this project. We have mostly cutoff walls, which is about 24 miles, but we also have seismic fixes, levee raises. We have new setback levee, geometry improvements, erosion protection, new levees, the 2 closure structures that I briefly mentioned before, Smith Canal and 14 Mile Slough. And now I previously said that the fixes, we're talking about 24 miles of levee improvements. As you see on this slide, you see a total of 40.4 miles. That's the actual number of miles of improvements, not necessarily levees. If you look at the map, you will see that many levees have multiple fixes. So I just wanted to point that out. Next slide, please. This is a close-up view of the fixes, the proposed fixes in the North Stockton area. It's a pretty self-explanatory map if you use the key. A few things that I want to point out is, of course, the location of the proposed 14-mile slough closure structure. Just underneath that, we have indicated where the new setback levee will be. That was not reflected in the key. And the reach that is in the red borders, that is reach TS30L. We are currently designing the fixes for this reach, and this will be the first reach that we will construct. When we first entered the design phase, instead of spending a lot of time on figuring out how to start designs for multiple reaches at one time, we wanted to get moving on at least one reach quickly to show our headquarters that we are moving forward. So this reach was deemed as a simple reach that we could get started on and construct timely. Next slide, please. This slide is basically shows the same information as the previous slide, except for this is for the central Stockton area. One thing that I want to point out on this is the proposed, the location of the Smith Canal closure structure, which is towards the upper end of the slide. This closure structure is actually being constructed by the sponsors, not the Army Corps of Engineers, although it is part of the authorized project. So I just wanted to point that out. Next slide, please. The current status. Again, we are in designs of the first planned reach, which is TS30L. This slide basically gives you a little bit of information on current tasks that we are working on or will start working on and complete within the next month or so. The geotechnical 35% basis of designs, we plan to have those completed in September. And upon completion of those, we will start our geotechnical 65% basis of designs, as well as the general 35% designs. In order to start the general designs, we need to have some type of basis of geotechnical information. Moving on, we have already started our hydraulics 100% basis of design this month, and we plan to complete those in November, as well as the two previous tasks as well. The environmental assessment and coordination, we plan to begin that task at the first week of September. The amount of time to do that coordination is to be determined, because we will have to coordinate with other agencies such as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they have their own schedule and tasks to do. So we need to coordinate with them. Same thing for the cultural resources consultation. That's going to start first week in September as well. And again, we have to coordinate with other agencies such as State Historic Preservation Office and tribes. So we need to work with them to determine an end date for that activity as well. Next slide, please. In addition, we are also doing a few other tasks such as geotechnical analysis and pre-design work. Well, actually, what we're doing is we're making plans to move forward with work on the next batch of reaches for this project. And this plan will include geotechnical analysis and pre-design work. This is needed before we can actually go into designs, because we really don't have any geotechnical information on a lot of reaches. So we are currently developing scopes for what this work will look like. And we want to start this work in fiscal year 2021, which from the federal standpoint, that begins in October. And we want to start that work on the North Stockton levees, which face the Delta, as well as remaining Delta front reaches. When I mean remaining Delta front reaches, the TS30L reach that we're working on is part of that Delta front. And so we want to look at the remaining Delta front reaches in this exercise. Now, depending on how much federal funding we receive next fiscal year, we also may extend that work, the geotechnical analysis and pre-design work, to other reaches, in particular, the Calaveras River right bank reaches. But again, it all depends on federal funding that we will receive, hopefully will receive in 2021. And it also will depend on the execution of the project partnership agreement. Right now, we do not have an agreement in place to do this work. In addition, we don't have an agreement in place to even construct the TS30L reach. We only have an agreement in place right now to just design the TS30L reach. So the execution of the project partnership agreement is pretty critical. In addition, we have a risk assessment or risk assessments being done for this project. In response to what happened during Hurricane Katrina, the Corps established a risk assessment process in which a so-called risk assessment team, a risk cadre team, teams are to be assigned to levee and dam projects to analyze risk. The teams basically take existing and future without project conditions and analyze possible risk associated with those conditions. They develop risk measures and plans that we can then implement into our designs. For the current TS30L reach that is in designs, we have a risk cadre team that has completed a risk assessment with the exception of their final report. The risks on this reach were minimal, given that this reach is fairly robust in its current state. And also this reach is just a little bit over a mile long and is somewhat limited to examine risk for a 1 mile stretch of levee that is part of an overall larger system. But because we are in designs of this reach, the team moved forward with an assessment on just this reach. For the North Stockton area, the team has already started their risk assessment, and they have plans to complete this assessment in March of 2021. For the Central Stockton area, they have plans to begin the risk assessment in February, and the completion date is later to be determined. Next slide, please. So with that said, I would now like to turn the presentation back over to Larry Ito.
Thank you, Brett. Larry?
Thanks, Patrick. I appreciate that. I want to give you guys a brief, a brief outline of the PPA and LPPA. Next slide. The PPA obligations for the state are to provide the state cost share of the CAS payment to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, obtain lands, easements, right-of-way, relocation and disposal sites, the LERDs, and provide operation and maintenance assurances, O&M. Next slide. The total PPA costs are approximately $1.4 billion. The cost share is split 65% federal, 35% non-federal share. The non-federal share is split with the LPPA at a 70% for the state share and a 30% for CVFPB share, making the federal cost share approximately $900 million, the state share of $339 million, and CVFPB share of $145 million. I want to point out that this project has one of the highest benefit cost ratios of any flood project in the country of 7-to-1. With that said, both DWR and the Central Valley Flood Protection Board staff and legal counsels have reviewed these documents, and it is our recommendation to move forward with both the PPA and LPPA. Next slide. Future board actions. Next month is September's board meeting. We plan on presenting the PPA and LPPA to the board for consideration and approval, and to adopt a resolution to approve and sign the agreements. Next slide. At this point, I'd like to ask the board if they have any questions for me or Patrick Howell with the Corps. And also, like I mentioned before, Chris Elias, Executive Director for JAFCA, is here, and he's available for any questions if you have questions for the agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate that. Any questions from the board at this point? This is a project that we've seen a number of times, including the time when we reviewed the plan update.
Board member Countryman had a question for Patrick on the risk assessment.
Okay. Joe?
Hi, Patrick. Good to see you online here. Does
Hello.
the risk assessment include climate change analysis?
The risk assessment includes climate change from a sea level rise standpoint. And that's in climate change, it does not. We do not have current guidance from a core standpoint to incorporate any type of inland climate change information. Over.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other board questions? Okay, Ryan, I think we have some questions from the public.
We do. We received a letter with attachments from Mr. Dominic Gooley, and I have added that to the public record, and I see he is online and has his hand raised if he would like to comment.
Dominic, good morning.
Hi, President and Central Valley. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I sent my comments in writing. I looked over this extensively, this feasibility study, and early on they dropped three major flood options for various reasons: reservoir reoperation, additional reservoir storage, additional transitory floodplain storage. And I don't think this plan is very good. Personally, I don't know how the city of Stockton or San Joaquin County is going to be able to raise $145 million. I don't think the Delta Front really serves much purpose. I mean, all the urban levees are 3 foot above the floodplain. I'm a Delta engineer. I represent over 50,000 acres in the Delta, and I have 1.5 foot of freeboard. So we have quite an overflow capacity for the urban levees in flood situations. The gates, I think, are very defective. They cause more flooding than they have many negative impacts. When the gates are closed, they can't run the pump stations throughout Stockton. They're damming off the main drainage canals for the city and causes more flooding than when they would be open. They're navigational hazards, water quality, tidal exchange issues. They are building the Smith Canal Gate right now. However, I know that the gentleman from the Corps of Engineers correctly pointed out that the Corps is not participating in that project. And I'm not sure, Mr. Ito, maybe you could answer the question of whether or not the DWR is contributing to this project that's being built as we speak. From a constructability question of whether that Smith Canal can be built, there's many issues with it. It's 3 times the cost of what they said it was going to be. It's a 4-year project, likely going to be 6 at the end of the day. So anyways, the bottom line for my concern is I think the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, rather than look into this project that serves little purpose, is probably not going to be able to be funded. I think they should go back to the drawing board. And as Joe Countryman said, and as Mary Jimenez has outlined in her very good work that she's been doing, is upstream storage is what we need, or some way to be able to divert flood flows away from the San Joaquin River somewhere. And there's a lot of vacant land in the foothills. There's a lot of vacant land. There's a lot of reservoirs. The Salt Springs Reservoir could be raised and deepened to handle some water. I think we just need to go back to the drawing board and have some place to divert these floodwaters. And so this plan, what they call the Lower San Joaquin, really is only a delta issue. trying to help levees that are already FEMA certified. It does nothing. 17, Rec District 17, that's a very important area there because that is really the lower San Joaquin. This project is really upper Delta type stuff. I mean, most of these projects are within the tidal zone of the Delta. And again, the urban levees have a minimum of 3 foot of freeboard. They don't have seepage issues. My 50,000 acres of levees have 1.5 foot of freeboard. Some of them have some minor seepage issues and other sort of stuff like that. So anyways, I ask that you consider, I know it's a big deal to put the brakes on something, but I don't think this is going to go through. The 145 million, where's that going to come from? The people here in Stockton don't see a benefit from this. 200-year flood certification, is that provided by this project? I don't think it is. These urban levees are certified by FEMA. Flood insurance is not an issue. So I think that you should really take a consideration of putting the brakes on this thing and going back to the drawing board and look at, in my comments, you'll see I included the items that were rejected. I included a picture of the 14-mile sluice gate and how it's going to impact the boating. And I also included a picture of the Smith Canal gate, if you can see that. That's the impact of flood closing the gate during a storm. More flooding than what exists now. So anyways, thank you. And just for the next month, if you guys are going to be approving some funding, I think you really need to take a look. So so then I have one question on the board, Mr. Ito. Is the Department of Water Resources paying currently for the Smith Canal gate?
Well, no, wait a minute, Dominic. Address the board, please, and I'll ask Mr. Ito to respond.
Yeah, Mr. Edgar, I was wondering if you could inquire into whether or not the Department of Water Resources is paying for that component of the Lower San Joaquin River feasibility study at this time. I know they have a contract, but the question is whether or not they're providing funding at this time because construction is going on.
Fine. Thank you. Thank you, Dominic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have a response? Larry, do you want to respond to any of those comments?
Yeah. The Smith Canal Gate was an EIP UFR project, and there is funding for that, and it is currently being funded.
Okay. Then any other questions or any other items you want to respond to, Patrick or Larry?
No, I am fine. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the board at this point? Okay, this is an informational. Joe, you've looked at this, haven't you? Joe Countryman?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, this is an informational item today, and we'll be considering and taking action, hopefully taking action next month on this item. Thank you, everybody, for your presentation. Let's move to item D, the Sacramento Levee Section Overview. And Silva has this presentation as an informational item.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Ryan, if you can put up the slides, please. Thank you, Ryan. Good morning, President Edgar, members of the board. My name is Selva Selvamohan, Chief of the recently established Sacramento Levee Section board staff. The point of my presentation today is to give you an informational briefing on the Sacramento Levee Section and its activities to date. Next slide, please, Ryan. Here is an overview of what I would cover in the presentation. I will give you a brief background about the section. We'll introduce the section staff, will cover projects the section has been working on. We'll show you section's coordination efforts. We'll also briefly touch on few documents the section produced to date. And finally, we'll cover some of the permitting and inspection activities the section has been involved in. Next slide, please, Ryan. The Sacramento levy section was created under a reimbursable authority and through a funding agreement with Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency, also known as SAFCA. The funding agreement was executed in December 12 of last year. Because the section will be working on major flood control improvement projects, it was housed under the Plan Implementation and Compliance branch headed by Greg Harvey. The funding agreement with SAFCA supports funding for 1 senior engineer, 3 engineers, water resources, and 1 staff services analyst. Next slide, please. Thanks, Ryan. So here you see the Sacramento levy section staff, so far. As you can see in this slide, I started as the section chief in November 18 of last year. In February of this year, Wendy, whereas everybody knows her, joined the section as a staff services analyst. After that, Charles Sharma, section's first engineer water resources, joined us in April 1st of this year. After Dennis Bartlom joined the section as a water resources engineer on August 3rd. We are currently in the process of hiring the last position of engineer water resources. Next slide, Ryan. So this slide shows the project the Sacramento levy section have been working on. These projects are American River Common Features 16 project, Natoma project, Folsom Dam Race project, Berda 9699 project, South Sacramento County Streams project, and the Folsom Dam. The first 3 are in design or construction phases, and the last 3 projects in this list includes in closeout phase. Of these projects, the American River Common Features 16 project was the primary gateway for the creation of this section. The section's primary focus would be on the encroachments identified within the footprint of the Sacramento River East Levee. The SREL, also known as Sacramento River East Levee project, consists of seepage and stability improvement work along the Sacramento River East Levee from the confluence to Freeport. Next slide, please, Ryan. This is show the American River Common Features 2016 project and its elements. We have seen this slide number of times. We can move to the next slide. The section has been working very closely with SAFCA in addressing the encroachments within the Army Corps construction footprint. In support of the currently ongoing 2020 construction, a total of about 14 encroachments were removed through SAFCA's incentive program. The 2021 encroachments impact about 55 encroachments, and we are working very closely with SAFCA and its consultants in addressing those encroachments before the next year construction in 2021. Consequently, we will be working very closely with SAFCA and its consultant in addressing the 2022-2023 encroachments. Next slide, please. So what you see in this slide are a few of the coordination meetings the section has been participating related to the section's project. I'm not going to go through one by one, but you can see number of PDT meetings and then strategic communication meetings, real estate meetings, all are related to the section's projects. So by participating in these meetings, we get the first-hand information of the project progress. We represent the board's participation in all these meetings and also able to keep the management apprised on the project status. It also helps us to contribute to the Plan Implementation and Compliance branch EO report updates and attachments that you have been seeing lately in the last few months. Slide, please, Ryan. Now I will go over some of the documents the section produced so far. The first one you see here is the document that prepared in December 2019. That's a sections development operations plan. It's kind of a roadmap for sections development, only a few pages, but it includes staff hiring timeline, staff assignments, staff training, the short-term and long-term plans for the section. It was produced back in 2019. Next slide, please. The next document we prepared is a standard operating procedure. This was prepared, the first version was prepared back in March 2020 of this year. Because the section will be doing similar functions as by the operations branch, permitting, inspection, enforcement, we did not duplicate the effort of what they already have. So we basically incorporate the SOPs and also provide project details, project background, project schedule, milestone, and all that in one place. So staff, when they are working on any project, they can go back and refer to the SOP and get project-related information. And we plan to continue to update this as project evolves in time. Next slide, please. So what you see here is a first quarter report that we prepared in fulfillment of Safeguard's funding requirement. The Safeguard's funding requirement requires us to submit quarterly reports documenting its functions broken down into each project. What you see here on the right-hand side is the cover page, and on the left side is the table of contents. The first report was submitted in March, and we submitted the second quarterly report in July. We will continue to submit subsequent quarterly reports each quarter. Next slide, Ryan. So the two slides will show you the documents the section produced, and they are currently under review. The first one you see here is a guidance document we prepared for encouragement removal and replacement along the Sacramento River East Levee. This document basically documents the steps involved in removing and replacing the encouragements, and also try to answer the commonly asked questions by homeowners regarding their encouragements. And also it facilitates consistent messaging across all parties involved in. Like I said before, this is under review. When it is finalized, we will share with the project team across the board. Slide, Ryan. This is also a document we prepared, and it's currently under review. This is a single-page, double-sided, frequently asked questions. Kind of a handout or a quick reference sheet answering the most common questions coming from the homeowners. We hope this help in streamlining the communications across the board, and then again, like I said, we will share it once it's finalized. Next slide, Ryan. So the purpose of this slide is to show the GIS capability of the Sacramento Levee section. We produce this map in-house, and it shows all the projects that our section have been involved in. This is an in-house capability and will help us in producing maps, drawings that can be used in project briefings or project meetings and PIC branch EO reports and attachments. So as you can see at the title block of this map, this is an in-house produced map, and it shows the GIS capability of the section. Next slide, Ryan. So in this slide, we'll take a quick look at section's past and ongoing permitting activities. So the section was created in December, so it's only 9 or 10 months so far. So in May of this year, we processed a CMAT pole relocation permit, and then we are currently processing 11 permit applications as submitted as part of the Levee Improvement Program construction that was completed 2012-2014 timeframe. And finally, we are preparing ourselves for encouragement applications that will be coming from the Sacramento River East Levee construction portion. At this point, I wanted to notice, all these permitting and inspection activities, we coordinate with operations section chiefs to make sure we are consistent in our methodologies and operations. Feedback and guidance by those sections are much appreciated. Last slide, Ryan. I think that's the last slide. Yeah, so that's the end of my presentation. And at this time, I wanted to thank all the board staff who helped us and continue to help us in our journey here in the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Selva. That was showed an excellent progress moving forward. We've been after that for a long time. I think this is going a long ways in terms of trying to inform our stakeholders. Any questions from the board on Silva's presentation? Okay, members of the public have any questions? Okay, I think we'll move on then. Thank you very much, Silva. We appreciate that. A lot of work involved in that, I'm sure.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, we're on item 8C, Chester Dam Diversion Overview, and this may be a surprise to some of you. It was to me when I first learned about this, that we actually have a dam. But at this point, Connie, will you want to give us our little presentation on this?
Sure. Thank you, President Edgar and members of the board. My name is Connie Perkins, board staff. I'm here today with our executive officer, Leslie Gallagher, to give you an overview of the Chester Diversion Dam. Next slide. So before I talk about the Chester Diversion Dam, I'm going to do a little overview about the Sacramento River watershed, the dams that the board owns. There's more than one. Then I'll give you a history description and talk about the emergency action plan for Chester Dam. Then I'll hand it over to our executive officer to talk about her recent tour. Next slide. So our Sacramento River Basin is about 27,200 square miles, has about 440 miles of rivers, canals, and streams, and about 1,000 miles of levee. The major tributaries include the Feather, Yuba, Bear, and American rivers, which discharge to the Sacramento River from the east. It has 4 relief bypasses: the Sutter, Tisdale, Sacramento, and Yolo Bypass. 5 major weirs: the Sacramento, Fremont, Moulton, Tisdale, and Colusa. Our own Cache Creek Settling Basin, which maintains the flood conveyance integrity of the Yolo Bypass by removing sediment, and other numerous structures such as minor weirs, pump station, relief structures, bridges, and gauging stations. Next slide. So the Sacramento River Basin is made up of 5 major watersheds: the Feather River, American River, the Sutter Bypass, the Yolo Bypass, and the Sacramento River. You can see them on that picture. Next slide. So the board actually owns 2 dams, the Cache Creek Settling Basin and Chester Dam. The Cache Creek Settling Basin is in the Yolo Bypass watershed, and it's located east of Woodland, where Cache Creek flows into the Yolo Bypass. And then the board also owns the Chester Dam, which is in the Feather River watershed and part of the North Fork Feather River project. It's northwest of Lake Alamonor, along Highway 89, and upstream of Lake Oroville in Plumas County. Next slide. So the Cache Creek Settling Basin was authorized through the Flood Control Act of 1928 as part of the Sacramento River Flood Control Project. It was authorized and constructed for sediment management, as I said before. The purpose was to control debris and sediment that would otherwise flow into the Yolo Bypass and compromise its capacity. Also, levees that are part of this project are intended to reduce the flood risk to woodland and adjoining ag lands. It's about 3,600 acres and was built in approximately 1938, but the settling basin has been modified several times since its original construction. It is surrounded by 12 miles of embankment, a concrete step weir and downstream open channel, a low flow outlet consisting of 2 concrete box conduits, 2 slide gates. The basin is actually considered a state regulated dam, but does not require an emergency action plan because it's considered low hazard by Cal OES and is meant to spill over. Even though the board owns the facility, it is maintained by the DWR through their Sacramento maintenance yard. So the top picture you're looking at is a levee breach, in January of 1983, and the new West Levee that was constructed in 1992. The photo below is a view of the spillway weir located on the eastern embankment, and it's looking south. Next slide. So for the Chester Dam, it was authorized as a local project by Section 203 of the Flood Control Act of 1968. The Corps built the dam in the mid-1970s to reduce flooding to the town of Chester. It also protects Highway 36 bridges, 2 country roads, and a railroad. It consists of a diversion structure, excavated rock line diversion channel, about 3 miles of levees along the channel, and 7 grouted drop structures. Next slide. The earthen dam is 47 feet high with a crest length of 1,165 feet. The diversion channel is 12,200 feet long, 150 feet wide, and has an average depth of 13 feet. The diversion channel diverts floodwaters from the North Fork by the river upstream of Chester at the control structure / box culvert. This is a picture of the inlet side of Chester Diversion Dam, looking downstream. Next slide. So here's like a Google Earth picture that really shows so you can understand it. The water flows in the North Fork by the river from the left to the right, and heading south is the diversion channel that you see. The design of the dam allows the upstream section of the river to fill with water, entering the intake where it then pours into the North Fork by the river on the opposite side of the structure. When the amount of water arriving at the dam exceeds the desired flow capacity of the North Fork by the river, it starts to back up behind the dam and rises. Shortly thereafter, it reaches the elevation of the diversion channel and water begins to flow down the channel. The flow is diverted away from the town of Chester and into Lake Almanar, preventing flooding. Next slide. An estimated 3,000 CFS will pass through the diversion structure to the North Fork by the river and into Lake Almanar. And approximately 10,000 CFS would be conveyed by diversion channels to Lake Almanar at the designed flood flow. Even though the board owns this dam, it is operated and maintained by the Plumas County Department of Public Works. And here is a picture of the inlet side of the Chester Diversion Dam looking upstream. And you can see in the background the diversion channel and then the Feather River. Next slide. Here's a picture of the inlet with a trash rack. Next slide. And here is a picture of the outlet side of the Chester Diversion Dam looking downstream. You can see the Feather River at the end, and you can see the concrete spillway. And it's divided into 2 parallel sections to the right that serves as a fish ladder, allowing fish such as trout to return through the dam to spawn upstream. Next slide. Here's a picture of the diversion channel looking upstream. Next slide. And the Chester Dam Emergency Action Plan was created in 2019. This was after the Oroville Dam crisis. Only about 40 to 50% of the dams actually had EAPs. So in June 27th, 2017, Governor Brown signed Senate Bill 92 into law, which set forth new requirements requiring EAPs with inundation maps, other than those that were considered low hazard, like the Cass Creek settling basin. Chester Dam is considered a high hazard because of downstream damage it could do if it were to break. So an EAP was created to provide specific notification procedures to be implemented in the event of an emergency that may result in an impending or actual sudden release of water, for example, a failure of the dam. The content of the EAP includes notification procedures, response processes, general responsibilities, preparedness, and plan maintenance. Next slide. And here's a picture of the inundation map. Hopefully you can read it. The map has been prepared to predict potential inundation areas along the expected travel times for flooding. This is the probable maximum flood failure scenario. So at these design flows, there's no major impact expected downstream of the dam. The only impact is if the dam was to fail during periods of heavy inflows. So you can see in some areas, like where it's red, you'll have like 5 to 10 feet maximum depth. And in some areas, you'll see it'll take the water about 1 hour to reach it, to reach like the town of Chester. So now I'm going to pass this over to our executive officer, Leslie Gallagher, to talk about her recent tour.
Thank you so much, Connie and President Edgar, members of the board. I had the great fortune to be invited this last month to spend some time on Lake Almanor with Kim Oliphant, who is a retired annuitant that works occasionally with us and keeps a home up there in the summer. So taking that opportunity while we were at Lake Almanor, I did a side trip to the town of Chester. And what I have up here on the screen now is just how charming this little town is. The population of the town is half its elevation, so about 2,100 folks. It's a typical mountain town. It's adorable, and it's one of the reasons why we have the structures that we have, and why this is so important that we continue to protect these places. One of the other trips that I was fortunate to do this month, as Mr. Harrell and as Steve Rothert mentioned earlier, was to go on a helicopter tour as well with the MBI folks. And just looking at this beautiful landscape that we have up here, it's really good to step back and realize and look at and think about what it is we're protecting. We talk about protecting population, we talk about protecting infrastructure, but then you look at it and this is really what it is. So it's a charming town. I was so glad and grateful to be able to go. Getting the board out for tours has been one of my goals for the last few years. And this year we had several tours planned that due to COVID, we'd had to cancel. So I just wanted to share with you that I was able to do this and look at our facilities. Ryan, if you could move to the next slide, please. I looked up some historical pictures just to give you some context. This was what the town looked like in the 60s, and it looks much the same today. And that was the inundation on the left that you see. They had frequent inundation downtown every time there was a storm coming through. Next slide, Ryan. So this is what the facilities actually looked like on Sunday, July 26th when I was there. Going out and finding the facilities is also quite a challenge. Greg Harvey of our staff had to help me do that by sending coordinates because the dirt road that takes you to the dam is unmarked any other way. So it was fun just even finding it. These two slides that you see here, the two pictures, we're standing on top of the dam, looking upstream on the left and then downstream on the right. And you can see the fish ladder in the downstream photo. I was also heartened to see a county vehicle out there on a Sunday. So the county was obviously working, doing some work on the structure. The next slide, Ryan. We are now down off of the dam in what would be the inundation area. And I liked this picture because it shows some of the deposits that have been left from past inundation events. You can see in the foreground, and then the dam structure itself in the background. The next slide is turning about 180 degrees and looking upstream to the Feather River. And the gentleman you see in this picture is Greg Oliphant, who was our tour guide for the day. He grew up in that area and was able to give us lots of really great insider information that I appreciated. The next slide shows the diversion channel, and this is what it looks like now. So it's very well kept. We didn't see any debris piles. We didn't see any large vegetation that seems to be out of control. The county's doing a really good job maintaining this on our behalf. So we followed this road, next slide, Ryan, all the way down the diversion channel to where it crosses under Highway 36. and eventually ends up back in, next slide, Lake Almanor. So that is a picture of my family kayaking on Lake Almanor. And with that, I would just end. And if anyone has any questions about anything, Ryan, if you want to switch back to the regular.
I have a question.
Thank you, Leslie. Joe?
Is the fish ladder functioning properly now? I know for a long time it wasn't. I just was wondering.
That's an excellent question for our environmental team. I certainly haven't heard anything that it's not or that there are issues.
This is Andrea Buckley. I have not heard that either, but we will look into it. We're also working with California Department of Fish and Wildlife to provide them with some of the most current drawings and designs of that fish ladder. I believe they're doing background research for a proposed project, perhaps.
Yeah, when I was at the Corps, it was a real problem. We couldn't get the fish to go through it. We went in and added lights and all kinds of things to try to attract the fish, and I just was wondering if they had finally solved that problem. Thanks.
I'm not aware, but I will keep you updated on what I learned from dam safety team and from CDFW.
Any other board members have any questions? Anything from the public, Ryan?
I see nothing from the public.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Leslie and Connie. That was interesting. That's interesting that we have that facility and that it is maintained by the county. Okay, let us know, Leslie, what Andrea comes up with on the fish ladder, and give us a little email or something that answered Joe's question.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, we're on item 10 at this point, and the question is whether the board has any. This is the one in which you have all the operating reports in your packet. 10A is the update on the board's administration. 10B is the update on the activities of the operations branch. C, update on the plan implementation and compliance branch, and update on the activities of the environmental and land management branch. Do any of the board members have any questions? These are very informational reports, and the board appreciates the staff doing that.
Mr. President, this is Jane.
Hi, Jane.
Well, good afternoon. I don't have any questions, but I think I was waiting for someone to announce, and I see it in the executive officer's report that board members, Countryman, Ramirez, and
Johnson.
I'm blanking on that.
Brian Johnson, Madam Vice President.
Thank you. I'm with Bill. These meetings are numbing. We were confirmed by the state senate, so we've certainly enjoy having them on the board, and now they are confirmed and official for 4 years. So congratulations. That was the easiest, swiftest one that I'm aware of.
Thank you, Jane, for pointing that out, and congratulations to those members.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Okay, let's move to item 11 then, which are board comments, committee updates. Any comments from the board on updates that they have? Do you see any hands raised, Leslie?
I don't, Mr. President.
Okay.
Oh, I have just an update. I'd mentioned previously, Bill, that Darren had arranged a briefing from the Delta Stewardship Council.
Right.
staff on how they're handling climate change issues. And so we had that briefing, and I think that there's a lot of synergy there in that they actually went through, if you recall from the coordinating committee, they used 1,100 years of tree ring data
Right.
and updated it with the climate change. And they were able to analyze the impact on the reservoir to make a shot. I mean, obviously, you know, there's uncertainty involved here, but to get a reading on how climate change is going to affect the reservoir operation, I thought it was very useful. And I think, you know, we'll probably be able to use it in our flood analysis. So I was very grateful to have the opportunity to get that briefing.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Anybody else? Okay, Leslie, I kind of skipped over your executive officer's report. Do you want to comment on that any further?
Just to highlight, Mr. President, if anyone is interested in joining us on September 2nd for the Tuskegee Airmen presentation, that should be very interesting. That's a brown bag we're putting together with the local chapter talking about the Tuskegee Airmen experiment. So please feel free to dial in or come in on the Zoom meeting.
Okay, could you give us an email reminder, maybe with an invite on that, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, back to the agenda. Item 12 we're on, which are the update of the meetings. We have the FMA conference starting next week, or on September 8th through the 11th. Coordinating committee on September 23rd, and the September board meeting is on the 25th. We'll be doing both of those on a WebEx platform. So at this point, we're on our closed session, which is item 13. And members, as I mentioned before, we have a closed session, and at this time I'm going to recess this meeting to the closed session and would ask the board members to leave this platform, this website, the WebEx platform, and access the meeting platform that Leslie provided for you in an email to the board, I believe yesterday. And then Ryan will monitor this WebEx meeting so that when we're done, Leslie can tell him to announce the fact that we're back in session, there was no items reported out, and the time for adjournment. So at this point, we'll leave this WebEx meeting. Every board member needs to leave this WebEx meeting. I'll say thank you to everybody who participated in today's activities from the public. We certainly appreciate that. Board members will leave the meeting, and we will go to the other platform at this time. I'll see you over there. Thank you.
Hey, Ryan, it's Leslie. We're back from closed session. Are you there, Ryan? Ryan, are you there?
Hello?
Hi. So there's no reportable action out of closed session, and please note that the board meeting was concluded by a majority of board members at 12:41.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We're ending the meeting.